Dublin was a very, very fashionable music centre for about 2 years. A&R men liked the idea of hopping on a plane, come to Dublin, getting pissed for a weekend, signing the first sort of sub-U2 pub rock anthemic paisley-shirted bands they could find.
We're like a post-U2 generation. All the Dublin bands were bought up in the 80s, signed, milked and dumped by the companies. I think the 90s bands or the late 80s bands are a little bit more cynical.
The proliferation of labels in Dublin in particular is partly to do with the new breed of attitude. The fact that you can do things on your own terms.
There's a number of indie labels on the go. There's like 3 or 4.
More than that, far more.
Far more than that, is there?
Yeah, there's just loads of people putting records out. You know, you don't really care so much about being part of an industry, but just purely for the love of putting out records or whatever, and just a scene going like there hasn't been for quite a while.
There's probably more people in bands than actually people going to see them.
I don't remember so many independent releases coming out any other year for the last 10 years.
You know, for kids.
It took a bunch of people from outside to really get things going, like the people who started Dead Elvis. That's what really kind of kick-started this current thing anyway, as far as I can see. And they all came from Dundalk or somewhere.
Yeah, and nobody knew them, and then they just came down and were bringing out records, you know?
Yeah, and they just did their own thing.
My brother was working at a computer company and he had a bit of money put aside, and we kind of wanted to do it beforehand. There was SAC, before they had any record deal or they put out any records whatsoever. We wanted to put out a 7-inch single by them, just out of sheer, we thought they were great and didn't understand why no one else thought they were great, so we wanted to put out a single, and that never happened. And then I was running a club and I saw Wormhole and I thought they were amazing. Started off, we were going to do a single, and then we ended up doing an album. You start to cop on about how an independent label works, and you know, you start in your head romanticize these labels. Like say, you look at the back of every single Black Flag album and the back of all the early Husker Du albums, and they're all recorded in this place called Total Access, this studio. So you just work out that they're using some really dire, cheap studio and doing things really quick. I'm sure like Conzo from Female Hercules or Pat from Mexican Pets, I'm sure if you went to their houses, they're obsessive. I bet you they all have a row of records halfway down their bedroom, you know, and I bet you they're all from independent labels in the States. So they can see how those bands work, and they probably know little things like that. Husker Du and bands like that, when they released their first record, they were only selling 500 copies as well, you know. So they have an awareness of the history of independent music, and they can see how people did things right, how people did things wrong. We sorted out independent distribution in England for ourselves, and we're very seriously looking for distribution around Europe, because we get, like, somehow people in Europe have got the CDs we put out, have written to us, have played them on the radio, but we don't have the records there. So if we can work out a way, you know, to have a record out in France or Sweden or somewhere like that, maybe we can sell another 50 or 60 copies in each of those places. So it just makes it easier, gives you the feeling you're getting somewhere, you know.
The reason we put out a record is because everyone else was, and we just thought, they can do it, so can we, you know. People have seen since we put one out, you know, we can do it.
I need your love, I need your touch, oh, I need you oh, so much.
It's sort of a case of having too big a record collection and not enough talent, and we're like really knowledgeable and sort of anal almost about like silly old records and all, and people sort of appreciate that to a certain extent. And like, we're all at the stage now where we've got other things on the go, and we're not like trying to We're not trying to make a career out of this, so like people sort of like that about us.
Please don't give up on me. I need you to set me free. Don't you give up on me.
We're sort of like the band's band, you know. No one actually likes us apart from other bands. You know, like the kids don't really get what we're at.
We can get 1,000 albums manufactured for like £300 on CD. When we were planning to start off, I investigated how much vinyl cost, and to put out one 7-inch single with 2 songs would cost half the amount that it cost to put out a full-length album. And if you really want to use a CD to its full capabilities, you can put nearly 80 minutes of music on it.
I need someone to teach me to love. I'm out of practice, I'm out of touch. I need your love, I need your touch. Oh, I need you so much.
We're doing a single for Pincher Martin and a few other things lined up as well. So ideally I'd like to just do records where the bigger the scene gets and the more sort of money that gets involved in the scene. I'd like to see Hightown just becoming a label doing stuff where people wouldn't get signed by other people. The more sort of left field stuff and less commercial stuff is what I'd like to do. I liked it so much, I bought the company.
I'd say, well, don't start a label to start a label. Start a label because you love the bands. Don't put out bands that you think are just going to be profitable. Put out bands that you think are important. And don't expect to make any fucking money.
At the moment, most people are primarily doing it kind of, well, out of love first, and then kind of hoping to make a bit of money out of it then as well.
It's a lot of other things, but it's not making a fortune, or even making a decent weekly wage, or even making 50 quid a week. You know, or a tenner a week, or whatever, you know. It's for something other than that.
We have a certain kind of punk rock ethos about it, and I think that's what some of the other bands do as well.
If you want to talk about it, we can talk about it if you want. If you want to laugh about it, we can laugh about it if you want.
The punk thing has been around for a long time. There's been groups bringing over bands that affected us, that we were able to see small American bands that wouldn't have happened without the punk being here in Ireland.
We can fight about it if you want.
It's interesting for me to go and to see all these different places, to meet these people. It's like, hey, we have something in common, even though we're like, 3,000 or 4,000 miles apart.
Outside of big companies, Therapy, for example, have shown a route from the garage to mega stardom, or whatever you want to call it,
They've really kind of unified the Dublin scene, and like they didn't have to do that if they didn't want to, but they decided to, put out records for people, and that's cool.
We originally set up Blunt Records. It was myself and Dan Ogley, my friend, and Paul Shannon.
He'd just been made redundant, so he had some redundancy money.
Dan had saved some money left aside, and I've got like some money that had started to come in from Therapy.
Initially, the point of Blunt was to try and make available some stuff by Irish bands that was just not getting any public access. And the first release was April 1st, 1993, sort of deliberately an April Fool joke, really.
It was kind of something that I'd always wanted to do, and we get involved in record label because I love bands. Whenever I'm at home, whenever I'm here, I just go out and see bands every night. It really keeps me excited about music, and I know it's the same with Dan. It's like that kind of buzz, that thrill you get, is what keeps us going through it all. And it was just because we love Pet Lamb so much, and we wanted to get a record out by them.
First of all, we never thought we'd get signed up. We never thought we'd make any money. We just wanted to piss people off, get drunk and fall down and make noise.
Pet Lamb had a releasable DAT of material that was supposed to be being released in America, and the whole thing fell through. So it was sitting there waiting. We decided we wanted to do something with it.
And we just basically put out the Paranoid from the Neck Down EP, and Peel played it, and Lamac played it, and it was really exciting. Then we just thought we'll do another one that went from there, and I'd seen this band Joyrider in Belfast that I thought were really great.
The first two bands that we did, Pet Lamb and Joyrider, are both no longer on the label because they've been signed by bigger labels. You know, one Pet Lamb to Roadrunner, huge independent label, and Joyrider to Paradox, which is owned by A&M. I mean, we can't really compete with that.
Next thing, all these kind of punk bands were being signed up. So we cashed in.
It would be stupid of us to try and hang on to the bands when it's in the band's interest to actually move onward and upward onto bigger labels.
I think what we really want to do now is kind of expand it a bit more. At the minute it's all like 7-inch, 12-inch single formats, and we'd like to do an album with somebody, maybe the Mexican Pets, get a full-length album.
It's great to be independent. It's brilliant to be independent. You have full control of your output and the way you want to sell it. When you're assigned to a major, all these are stopped. They're just a bank. A major label is like a major bank.
It doesn't cost money to make a record. It costs money to promote and distribute a record. And that's what a major international company can give you. It's not what Dead Elvis and Blunt and Independent and whoever else are after, you know. I mean, that's not what they're about.
Because of what they are, major labels sign stuff which will make them a lot of money, because they have to, because their overheads are so high. Now, from that point of view, they need the independent market. They need independent labels to do an A&R job for them in some way.
They can see who's put out a record and who's managed to sell 500 copies, who does nice packaging, who's got their heads together. You know, it's inevitable that a small label will be used in that way. You have to take care of yourself and realise that that could happen. You know, that you might put a lot of work into something and someone else will just want to hijack it. So you have to think about that before you even start.
There are a few bands who will refuse to get sucked in and who will have less success, but inevitably everything has to follow certain corporate rules because it's part of an industry.
When you're talking business, you're removing yourself from the whole point of making music. You're talking business because you have to pay people to set up your lights and do your sound for you, and you're supporting people, and then you've just got like, you are not just a rock and roll band anymore. You are a business, and you've got to sell X amount of records, and if you don't sell them, then you can't make another record, and if you don't get people to come to your show, then you can't go out and play a show in the same place. You have to move to a smaller place, and you have to sack a few people, and that's all boring.
I would hope that the people making these records are not aware of the intricacies of music. It is a particularly horrible industry. It attracts scumbags, it attracts people who are into making a quick buck. Pop music is so temporal that it's easy to get in, make your dollar and get back out. And I think that this is what, I think it's a naivety that's driving these people along. And ultimately, the reality, I'm sure, will dawn. I mean, it's very, very noble and very, very laudable to do 500 copies of a single, but it's not very illusioning or very, very enlightening to be left with 450 of them under your bed and a big bill for production costs.
I just think that there's a much more disregard for how the business works because they're not chasing after it completely. You know, at least we're not. Once upon a time we probably were. We probably used to think we'll just do what we do and we'll get signed and then that'll be that. But we've lost that mentality. We don't necessarily completely understand how all the business works because we just don't really care about it anymore. It's just a matter of trying to make music and trying to earn a living from it. And if we get signed, then that's great. I mean, we'd like to. But you know, in the past, even if we had, we wouldn't have been ready for it. We probably would have ended up, you know, dumped as well, which I think is basically very demoralizing. I mean, it's fair play to a lot of the bands who were dumped and actually survived, you know, are still here today.
I think it's like a lottery if anyone's going to get signed, but if people are serious, what they should be doing is, as well as entering that lottery, they should be working to try to create a way where they can bring out a record every year and maybe grow a little bit at a time.
Would we sign to a major label? No.
Well, everything you do has got to be a stepping stone to somewhere else, you know? You can't want to just play gigs in the attic all your life.
It's not a very interesting story that a band starts out, gets popular, and signs to a major label. It's a much more interesting story that a band starts out, gets popular, and refuses to sign to a major label. It's much more interesting, much more satisfying.
We put out our first single to what I would think, for me, is unbelievable acclaim. I couldn't believe it. We just put out the second one, and, you know, it did occur to me, I wonder, is this going to do as well? Or, you know, in the media. Are people going to like it as much in the media?
I think progressively the Irish media is getting better at covering independent Irish bands, partly because of therapy, partly because of the success of the Cranberries, and the fact that the Irish media almost missed out on the Cranberries. Well, got to the Cranberries after the American media had got to the Cranberries, and after the Cranberries were already incredibly successful in America. And that was a bit embarrassing.
Okay, we've all put out records, you know, so what's the next step? The next step is to get them, make sure that they're played, make sure that you're written about, and make sure that you get press. And you see, that shouldn't come into it again. It never mattered before, and it shouldn't matter now. You make your record because you want people to listen to it, not because you want a press release or somebody to write about you. If that happens, it's a bonus. If anybody comes to me and says, you know, well, do you not think it's time for you to go to London? I mean, you've paid your dues in Ireland. You know, that paid your dues isn't one of those myths, and I think that's crap. You know, like, there's a young band here somewhere who've just formed, and hopefully in 3 weeks they'll do a gig, and they could be huge in 3 weeks, 4 weeks after that. Now, they might not have the depth, but in Ireland they're given the chance to come on. You know, there's a lot of bands to play with. It doesn't cost you a fortune. You know, you've got your families here or whatever, you've got places to stay. You go to London, you haven't got any of those. You don't know where to rehearse, you've got very few contacts, you have to start making a living out of it maybe, and you've no family behind you.
One of the most disgusting things I ever seen in the press recently was a review of a single by The Revenants, who are on an independent label. I saw a review of one of their singles in an English publication, and there was one line and it said, someone should tell these people that the potato is not a musical instrument, you know. When you're up against that, you never can tell whether perceptions here will change no matter what you do.
London is not necessarily the first step anymore, as it was for years. That was the progression, you know, from the country to Dublin, from Dublin to London, from London to Europe, from Europe to maybe the States at some stage.
And we just realised that, like, we've got bands over here that are better, you know, and it's like, that's the first time that's happened as well, that people have sort of realised that we don't have to look to England to second guess what they're at, you know, because that's just a bad way to go, you know.
The scene there has been so bad that it's given Irish bands confidence because they are much better. We out-rock the English. Yeah.
If, for instance, for some reason it all had to stop tomorrow, we'd all be in the pub tomorrow with each other, more than likely. There hasn't been the feeling of animosity. Maybe there will be. That's when we fall into the trap of, like, the media thing. Oh, you know, they got signed, did you hear that? I mean, who cares? Great.
It's sort of at the stage at the moment where it's very difficult to tell what's going to happen. Hopefully it'll sustain itself, and the quality control will always be there, and that, like, just good bands will be able to put out stuff.
I don't see us really being successful. I can see us still going in 10 years' time, and people maybe, like, my ambition for us is for someone to say in 10 years' time, they're a great band, you know, I've got a load of their records. No one ever listened to them, but they gave me a bit of a kick.
If in a year's time they all have another record out, then that's enough, you know.
What's the fastest part?
Show me around the streets you made your name in. Your loose roots, your early reputation. Show me around the streets you made your name in. Just where you met your first and greatest lover. Doesn't matter about the time we dated. Doesn't matter 'cause it's all
When they released their first record,